Hello everyone, my name is Elyse, and today we're starting lesson 4 of my music theory class. So far we've talked about rhythm, time signatures, and basic note names. Today we're going to build on those note names just a little bit and add in something called accidentals. Go check out my friend Alana's videos. She'll be teaching you Cruella de Vil, and that's going to be really important today because we're going to be using that song to learn more about accidentals. Last time we learned about note names and where they are on the staff. If you remember, we looked at a piano keyboard and showed that every white key on the piano has a specific note name that goes with one of the letters of the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But what we didn't talk about are the black keys on the keyboard, or those notes that come between the other notes that we listed on the keyboard. So we have in-between notes for most of the notes on the keyboard. This is great because sometimes we want to play something just a little bit higher or just a little bit lower than the regular notes. When you want a note that's just a little bit higher, you add what's called a sharp. It looks kind of like a hashtag. For example, let's look on the piano keyboard and let's see what the note between C and D would be called. Because we want to choose that in-between note between C and D, or go a half step up from C, we call the note C sharp, because we want a note that's just a little bit higher than C. If I wanted to write that down in my music for you to be able to know, I would put that hashtag symbol or that sharp symbol right before the note I wanted you to play. That same black key has another name. This second name is for when you want the note to be just a little bit lower than the note you're looking at. So if we're looking at the same example, C to D, we can also see that that note is just a little bit lower than D. So we would call that note D flat because it's a half note lower than D. The flat symbol looks kind of like a lowercase b, and you also put this right in front of the note on the music that you want someone to play. All of these in-between notes on the black keys have two names, a sharp name and a flat name. The next black key to the right is between D and E. So if I wanted a note a little bit higher than D, we'd call it D sharp. If we wanted a note a little bit lower than E, we'd call it E flat, but it's the same note. All of these in-between notes, or the black keys in this example, are a half step away from the white keys around them. For example, between C to D, there's a whole step. From C to C sharp, there's just a half step. From D to D flat, there's just a half step. You might notice that there are no in-between notes or no black keys between E and F and C and B. That's because C to B is just a half step and E to F is just a half step. It's not a whole step, so they don't have space for an in-between note. So if I wanted a note that's a half step lower than C, I would call it B, or technically C flat. The same thing if I wanted a note just a little bit higher than B, or a half step higher than B, I'd call it B sharp or C. The same thing goes between E to F. F is E sharp and E is F flat. If this is confusing, don't worry. We're not going to see that in Cruella de Vil, and you probably won't see it most of the time. I just wanted you to be aware of it. Now let's take a look at Cruella de Vil, because there are lots of accidentals in there. The accidentals are the sharps and flat symbols that you see before the notes. If you watched my last video about note names, you'll see that we figured out the first note of Cruella de Vil. We went from middle C and we took it down, and we figured out that the first note was F. But now we see that there's a symbol that looks like a hashtag, or the sharp symbol, in front of that F. That means you're actually starting on an F sharp. If we keep looking through our music and we go to the Vil in Cruella de Vil, we see that there is another funny symbol in front of it. It looks like a B, and if you remember that, that's a flat symbol. Now see if you can figure out what the regular note is. Remember where middle C is. It's one letter line below the staff. Go one space up from that, and we see that it's a D. Now if we have the flat in front of it, that means we're going to be playing D flat, or singing D flat in this case. There are a few more tricky rules about accidentals. The first one I want to talk about is that if you put a sharp or a flat at the beginning of a measure, it counts for the rest of that measure. So for example, if we have that D flat at the beginning of the measure, all of the other D's in the rest of that measure will also be D flat, but they might not put a flat symbol in front of it. If we look at measure 4, we'll see that the scare in If She Doesn't Scare You is D flat. The note right next to it, the U, has also a D, but it doesn't have a flat symbol. But it's still going to be D flat because if we have a flat at the beginning of the measure, it lasts for the rest of the measure. Here's another tricky rule. There's another symbol, a third symbol, called a natural. It looks like a box with two longer sides. This cancels out sharps or flats no matter what. So if we had another D right after that U, that was a D flat, and we put a natural sign in front of it, it would be just D natural or just regular D. Any note that's called just by its letter name, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, can also be called that note with a natural. So it could be A natural, B natural, C natural, and so on. If you look at the La in Cruella de Vil, you'll see that there's a natural in front of that note. That means that that note has no sharps or flats or is just a white key on the piano. Sometimes a composer will want you to sing or play a note a certain way for the entire piece of music. Maybe the composer wants you to only play C sharps instead of Cs in the whole music. So he'll put that sharp on a C in what's called the key signature. It's between the clef and the time signature. The key signature tells you what key the music is in, or what flats or what sharps are played on which notes. In Cruella de Vil, we see that there are 3 flats in the key signature. Let's see if we can figure out which notes they are by using the memory tricks that we had from last time. We see that we're in the treble clef, so we're going to use E, G, B, D, F, or elephants go bouncing down freeways, and face, that rhymes with space, for our memory tricks. The first one we see is the middle line. So we go E, G, B, and we know that it's a B flat. All of the B's in this piece will be played as B flat unless marked otherwise. The next note, we're going to use the face to figure out which one it is. We go F, A, C, E, and see that the top space is an E. So we're going to play all E flats in this music too. The last one, we're also going to use face, F, A, and figure out that the A flats will also be played throughout this whole piece. If there's another accidental in front of one of those notes, a B, an E, or an A, that cancels out what's in the key signature. So if I were to put a natural in front of the B on this piece, since it's supposed to be played B flat, it would actually just be a B because of that natural symbol right in front of it. Okay, I know that's an overload of information, but we're going to practice with Cruella de Vil and see if we can figure out what all of the notes in the first phrase are. If you remember from earlier in this video, we already figured out that the first note in Cruella de Vil is an F sharp. If you don't know why, let's just check it out really quick. So first we see that we're in the treble clef, which means we're going to be using E, G, B, D, F, and face for our memory trick. Second, we see that this first note is way below the staff, and we're in the treble clef. That means we're going to be using middle C and going down or backwards in the alphabet to figure out which note this is. Middle C is just one letter line below the staff. So we find that, and then we see that we have to keep going below that or going backwards in the alphabet to figure out which note we're at. So we go middle C, the space underneath that is B, the line under that is A, the space under that is G, and finally the line after that is F. And then we see we have a sharp symbol in front of it, so it's F sharp. We see that the next note is just one above F sharp, so it's G. And since there's no flats or sharps in the key signature for G, and there's no sharps or flats in front of the note, we know that it's just G natural. The next note, let's use middle C to figure out again. Middle C is just one letter line below the staff, and then we're just going to the space right below that, or going backwards in the alphabet, 1. So we see that it's a B. We do know that there's a B flat in the key signature, but because there's a natural in front of it, it cancels it out, and this is a B natural. The next note up is middle C, and since there's no flats or sharps in the key signature for it, and there's no flats or sharps in front of the note, it's just C natural. Now we know that the first 4 notes are F sharp, G natural, B natural, and C natural. The next note is just the space above middle C, which means it's D. And right in front of this D, we see a lowercase b or a flat symbol, so we know it's going to be D flat. This next note looks a little familiar. It's just one space below middle C, so it's B. And remember our rule, if there's an accidental at the beginning of the measure, it counts for the entire measure. So we have a B natural at the beginning of the measure, so we're going to forget about the B flat in the key signature and just play a B natural. The next note is just normal middle C, C natural. The next note we see is the first line on the staff, It's an E for elephants go bouncing down freeways. And we see that there's a natural symbol in front of it, so we're going to forget about the flat that's in the key signature and just play E natural. The next note is right above that, or the first space, so we can use F-A-C-E or face to remember which that is, and it's F. And since there are no flats or sharps in the key signature for it, and there are no flats or sharps right in front of the note, we know it's F natural. The next note is the second line in the staff for E, G, B, D, F, so we know that it's a G. And we see that there are no sharps or flats in the key signature for it, but there is a flat symbol right in front of the note. That means we're going to be playing G flat. Now I want you to go ahead and practice and try and figure out the notes for the rest of the beginning of this song. Try to see how far you can go. I'm going to have a little bit of the answers up so that way you can double check, but I think you'll do great. Remember all the tricky rules. If you get confused, come back and watch again. I know it's super tricky and you'll probably forget sometimes, and that's okay. Remember, this is a new language. This is new things you're learning. It's okay to mess up. You'll be great. Just keep practicing. Don't give up. See you soon.